If you're one of the solo practitioners who received the 9% maximum penalty for MIPS last year, give me less than 10 minutes and allow me to explain to you how not only your sustainability is in jeopardy, but your autonomy. If you didn't change anything operationally on how your practice performs, here's what that's about to cost you. Because payment is now tied to how your practice handles the patient throughout their journey, meaning recoupments are based on how your clinic performs operationally, tied to each metric. And if that's not being managed, tracked, and supported inside your clinic, that disconnect is exactly why penalties feel unpredictable and will repeat year after year. So let's say your primary care practice total annual Medicare revenue is $200,000. A maximum 9% penalty would be $18,000. Now let me walk through the last few years so that you can see if these things were not handled in your clinic, you will be able to know or predict whether or not you think you will be penalized again. So let's start with performance year 2022. In this year, the exceptional bonus ended. That meant that there was no longer an incentive for people to try to do their best because they wasn't going to receive the bonus pay. The second thing that happened was any eligible practice above the low volume threshold, it became mandatory for you to report. The third thing was the final score performance threshold went up to 75 points from 60. So that left 30% of solo practitioners to receive the 9% maximum penalty. Now, they didn't find out about this penalty until 2024. So that was at $18,000 that hit them. But that was only if you didn't have the COVID exemption. Because in performance year 2023, that COVID waiver expired. So then again, 29% of solo practitioners received this penalty. That was the penalty you got last year. So now this is possibly 2 in a row. So the reason why performance year 2024 became a key year was because it became the first full enforcement year, making participation mandatory for eligible clinicians, and the data completeness increased to 75%, which means you reported on 75% of the total eligible patient population. And if it's not reached, if you're a small clinic, it's a maximum of 3 points for that category because only the large practices get the 0. But that also meant that you had a lesser chance of reaching the 75% where you did not get penalized. So you're already under the curveball for your final score. But that is the one that we're going to find out about 2026. So now if you look here from 2022 to 2023, there was a 1% decrease. I'm curious to see if there will be a change because in my opinion, CMS is thinking a 1% decrease is improvement. When you think about businesses, when you think about trying to better yourself, 1% every day, year, etc. is improvement. And the goal is for that improvement to compound. So in 2025, there were 35 total cost measures where clinicians did not have to submit any data for this performance category because it used claims data. So that meant if it wasn't documented properly for the billing to catch it, it was not captured. And we all know if it wasn't captured, it wasn't done. And they used that to calculate the cost measure performance. This is going to be the penalty you find out about in 2027. Now here in 2026, this will be the first full year for MVP primary care. Because 1 year after the MVP is finalized, it becomes mandatory. And primary care finalized in year 2024. But I believe last year you still had the option to choose between that one and the traditional. You have 4 measures that you must meet. And some of them must be high priority. And it requires the 75% completedness of all of them, not some of them. So that means for each specific chronic condition, how did your billing, documentation, coordination efforts, patient compliance that attributed to the failure in the past, change since the last penalty to prevent the next penalty. Because otherwise, you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 consecutive years where your medical practice could be penalized, and $90,000 to lose in 5 years. That's a little bit more than jeopardy, in my opinion.